You're not being haunted. You're being invited to stop running, to stop filling the quiet with noise, to stop calling this pain weakness, because the memory that won't leave isn't trying to break you, it's trying to wake you. And Zen says, until the heart sits still, the echo will continue. You don't miss them, you miss who you became in their presence. You keep saying you miss them, but if we slow everything down and really sit with what's underneath that ache, you'll start to see something different. You don't just miss their voice. You don't just miss the memories or the messages. What you're really aching for is how you felt when they were near, how soft your chest became, how your guard dropped even just a little, how you could breathe deeper, how, even in silence, you felt seen. It's not about them. It's about the version of you that came alive in their presence. That spark, that light, that gentleness, that feeling of being held without being touched, that safety, that freedom to just be. And now that they're gone, it feels like that version of you disappeared with them. But it didn't. It was always you. They didn't give it to you. They just unlocked a door inside that had been waiting for years to be opened. In Zen, there's a simple truth. Just as a candle cannot burn without fire, men cannot live without a spiritual life. They weren't the fire. They were just the match. You were the candle. You were the flame. And here's the hard part to accept. You still are. That soft, alive, open part of you hasn't gone anywhere. You've just stopped looking inwards. You started believing that only they could bring it out. But that's not true. That part of you is still glowing, quietly, softly, patiently, waiting for you to come back. Not to the memory, not to the past, but back to you. They came into your life to remind you what it feels like to love yourself, without even realizing that's what they were doing. Now they're gone. And the real journey is learning how to keep that feeling alive, without needing someone else to unlock it again. Because once a light has been lit, it never truly goes out. It only waits for you to remember how to hold it. Their memory returns because a wound was left unnamed. Sometimes a memory returns not because it wants attention, but because something inside you never got the chance to speak. You thought you moved on. You changed your number. You muted them. You stopped checking the places they once stayed. But their presence still visits. And it never knocks. It just enters. Not always through words. Sometimes through a smell, a sound, an empty evening, a dream, or a moment of stillness that suddenly feels too loud. And you wonder why. Why does it still echo? Why does your heart still jolt as if they're near? It's because there was something you never got to express. Something unfinished, unspoken, unreleased. The Buddhists say, what the heart cannot express, the mind will relive. Again, and again, and again. Not because you are weak, not because you haven't healed, but because some wounds don't bleed outward, they bleed inward. You didn't get to explain what you really meant. You didn't get to ask what you really needed. You didn't get to cry the tears you held back the night you smiled and let them go. And now, that silence is echoing louder than any goodbye ever could. It's not obsession. It's grief. But not grief for them. Grief for the version of you that never got closure. Grief for the truth you buried in the name of strength. Grief for the love you weren't allowed to mourn. Because they weren't really yours. But your heart doesn't speak the language of logic. It only knows what it gave. And it remembers who it softened for. So these memories return like waves, not to drown you, but to show you what still needs to be released. In Zen, we don't always heal by doing. Sometimes we heal by sitting, by letting the ache rise fully without fear, without judgment, by allowing the pain to finally speak. What would happen if you stopped resisting the memory and listened instead, not to what they said, but to what you never got to say, not to what happened, but to what was never allowed to happen? When you run from the ache, you only deepen the silence. But when you sit with it, when you breathe into it, you begin to give language to the part of your soul that's still whispering, "I never got to tell the truth." And the truth doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't need an audience. Sometimes all it needs is you. Sitting quietly, hand over heart, finally letting the tears fall that were once swallowed. That's where peace begins. Not when the memory disappears, but when you finally stop hiding what it came to reveal, because the moment you name the wound, you stop needing to relive it. And the echo? It becomes a whisper, then a breeze, then silence. The more you push them away, the more they echo. You keep trying to erase them, to mute every part of the story that still hurts. You unfollowed them, deleted photos, buried memories beneath distractions, laughed louder, worked harder, filled every empty space with noise so the silence wouldn't speak. But somehow, even after all that effort, their presence still shows up. In the quiet moments, in the lull between texts, in the songs you used to skip, but now pause because they still know your name. You wonder what's wrong with you, why your heart keeps going back to someone who's already left, why your mind still replays scenes you've already tried to forget. But Zen has a gentle truth. What you run from becomes your shadow, and shadows don't disappear in motion. They follow you until you stop, because every time you push the memory away, you give it power. Every time you fight the thought, you feed the echo, and every time you call it weakness, your soul feels unheard. The Buddha once said, "You can search the world for someone who deserves your love more than yourself, but you won't find them." And yet, you keep chasing distractions, not realizing that your resistance isn't protecting you. It's exhausting you. You think forgetting is healing, but healing isn't about forgetting. It's about facing, gently, with compassion, with stillness. There's a story of a monk who told Buddha, "Every time I sit to meditate, my mind is attacked by memories of someone I've lost." Buddha didn't offer solutions. He simply said, "Do not battle the thoughts, bow to them, and let them pass like clouds." The more you fight the memory, the more tangled it becomes in your energy, because pain, like wind, cannot be pushed. It must be let through. You're not healing by pretending they meant nothing. You're just delaying the moment you realize they were sent for something greater than an ending. They were the mirror. You were the lesson. Every echo you feel is not a sign that you're stuck. It's a sign that something inside you is asking for presence. Not to go back, not to reopen the wound, but to feel it all the way through. When you stop resisting the echo, you finally hear what it's been trying to say. That you're not broken, you're remembering. Zen teaches, the bell keeps ringing until it is heard. That memory will keep returning, not because you're failing, but because something sacred within you is waiting to be seen, not by them, by you. So, stop running, stop burying, stop labeling this as weakness. Sit, close your eyes, let the memory rise like incense. Watch it, feel it, bow to it, not because it wins, but because you're finally ready to be free. The echo stays because you never got to say what your soul needed to say. There are things you never said, Not because you didn't want to, but because you didn't know how. Maybe the moment passed too quickly. Maybe they walked away too easily. Or maybe your voice cracked every time your truth tried to come out. So you swallowed it, pushed it down, smiled when your soul was screaming. And now, you're left with a silence that won't stop echoing. It's not them you keep replaying. It's you, the version of you that never got to speak. The moment your heart had something to say, but was never given the space to say it. Zen teaches, what remains unspoken becomes what remains unhealed. You didn't just lose someone. You lost the chance to be fully honest. You lost the chance to release the emotion while it was still alive. And now it haunts you not because it's unfinished with them, but because it's unfinished within you. We all carry a sentence we never finished. A goodbye we whispered in our chest but never let pass through our lips. An apology we never voiced. A truth we never stood up for. A scream we buried beneath politeness. And those words, they don't disappear. They don't fade with time. They wait, in the bones, in the breath, in the spaces between your thoughts. And they echo, not as punishment, but as a request, a sacred request for release. You think you've moved on, but deep down, a part of you still wonders what might have changed. If only you had said that one thing, that one truth, that one final heartbeat of honesty. It's not closure you need from them. It's completion within yourself. The Buddhists call this unfinished energy, a conversation trapped inside the heart that never made it to the surface. It becomes noise, restlessness, a constant replay of what you should have said. But here's the beautiful truth. You can still say it, even if they're not around to hear it. You can write the letter you were too afraid to send. You can sit with yourself, place your hand over your heart, and whisper every word that got lost in the chaos. Not for them, but for you. You're not seeking their response. You're seeking your own freedom. Zen doesn't teach revenge. It teaches release. And release doesn't require an audience. All it needs is stillness, honesty, presence. Sit, breathe, and let it rise. Let the words come without judgment. Let the anger come without shame. Let the sadness fall without resistance. Because the words you never said are not gone. They're just waiting for permission. And when you give them that permission, when you finally speak your soul's truth into the quiet, you'll feel it. The shift, the release, the peace. You'll realize the echo wasn't about holding on to them. It was about holding on to your truth. And the moment that truth is spoken, even if it's just in a whisper, the echo begins to fade. Not into forgetting, but into healing. Because some closures don't come from others. They come from finally hearing yourself. And when your soul is heard, the silence becomes sacred again. You think they're the lesson, but they were just the door. You thought they were the one, the answer, the reason your story was finally beginning to make sense. When they entered your life, it felt divine, perfectly timed, almost cosmic, as if the universe placed them in front of you with a soft whisper that said, "This is it." And for a while, it was. The connection, the understanding, the way your soul leaned in without fear. It felt like finding a door to a home you didn't know you had been searching for. But then, they left. Maybe slowly, maybe suddenly, but they left. And the doorway that once opened you closed behind them. And you've been standing there ever since. Asking questions the wind won't answer. Holding on to the memory of their smile like it still holds a key. Wondering why something that felt so meant was never meant to stay. Zen has a quiet way of explaining this, not through logic, but through truth. Not all people enter your life to walk it with you. Some enter just to wake you, to jolt something inside that had fallen asleep, to shake loose the part of your soul that had accepted numbness as normal. They weren't your destination. They were the door. The Buddha said, "When the student is ready, the teacher will appear." But he never said the teacher would stay. Some teachers come disguised as lovers, as friends, as strangers whose eyes feel like home, but their presence was never about permanence. It was about provoking evolution. They entered your life to stir your stillness, to bring forward the feelings you buried, to remind you of what your heart was still capable of, not because you needed them to complete you, but because you needed them to crack you open, so something deeper could finally emerge. And now you keep calling them the One. But in truth, they were just the mirror. They showed you what you still feared, what you still longed for, what you still hadn't healed. They opened a door you didn't know existed, a door inside you. And once it opened, their purpose was complete. But you're still standing there, waiting, wishing they'd come back and walk through it again. And that's why you feel stuck. Not because you haven't moved on, but because you're still looking at the door instead of walking through it. Zen teaches, when the door opens, enter, but never cling to the one who knocked. It's time to shift your gaze from them to what they revealed. What awakened in you? What came alive? What part of you stood taller, loved deeper, listened better, hoped louder? That's what this was about. Not them. You. You became softer, wiser, more present, more aware, more human, more divine. And even if they never return, that version of you did. That version of you is still here, waiting for you to keep walking, to keep blooming, to keep evolving into everything their departure was meant to call forth. Because the point was never the person. The point was always the path. And now, you're standing at the doorway of your own becoming. It's time to stop knocking on the past and start stepping into what was always waiting beyond them. You've mistaken familiar pain for real connection. You told yourself it was love, that what you felt must have been real, because it was so strong, so intense, so hard to forget. But sometimes, what we hold on to, the tightest, isn't love at all. It's pain that feels familiar, and the familiarity makes it feel safe. Even when it's hurting you, there's a Zen saying, the mind clings not to truth, but to what it has survived. Sometimes what we miss is not the person, but the feeling of being needed, the feeling of being seen, even if it was only temporary, even if it came with confusion, with hot and cold, with chaos, because chaos was once home. And when we don't heal, we start mistaking emotional storms for deep connection. You felt alive when they were around, but was it peace? Or was it adrenaline? Was it grounding? Or was it just the thrill of being chosen and then almost lost again? So many of us are not chasing love. We are chasing the emotional pattern of our first heartbreak. Not the one someone gave us. The one we lived quietly in childhood. The one where love meant proving. Where connection meant pleasing. Where attention came with tension. And silence meant punishment. And when someone comes along who triggers that same pattern, you don't run. You lean in. You call it chemistry. You call it fate. You call it home. But Zen asks you to slow down, to breathe, to look at the emotion beneath the emotion, because not every intensity is sacred. Not every ache is divine. And not every pull is love. Sometimes, the strongest pull is a wound asking to be touched, not repeated, not replayed, but healed. You felt something real with them, but real doesn't always mean right. You saw yourself in them, but it was the version of you that hadn't yet learned what peace really feels like. You weren't in love with them. You were in love with the feeling of being alive again. And sometimes, pain makes us feel alive, because we've been numb for so long. But love, real love, doesn't feel like survival. It feels like breath, like stillness, like being held without having to earn it. The Buddha once said, "Your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own unguarded thoughts." And when you mistake pain for love, you begin to guard your heart from the very peace you're meant to receive. You deserve more than intensity. You deserve more than the craving to be seen. You deserve ease. You deserve a presence that doesn't disappear when you're soft. But first, you have to tell yourself the truth. What you miss might not be them. It might be the drama that distracted you from your deeper loneliness. It might be the chaos that kept you from sitting in silence with your own heart. It might be the fight that helped you feel like you mattered, even if just for a moment. And now that it's gone, you're not sure who you are without it. But that confusion is not your end. It's your invitation. Zen teaches, don't seek the truth. Just stop cherishing your opinions. This includes the opinion that love must come with fire. That passion must hurt. That stillness means boredom. Let go of that belief. Let go of the idea that only what hurts can be meaningful. There is nothing enlightened about holding on to suffering just because it feels like home. Sit with this. Breathe through this. You are not missing a person. You are mourning a pattern. And once you name it, you are free to choose differently. And what comes next will not echo with confusion. It will whisper peace. And for the first time, you won't mistake that quiet for emptiness. You'll recognize it for what it truly is. Love. The kind that doesn't hurt. The kind that doesn't vanish. The kind that doesn't leave your soul questioning its worth. Your healing began the moment their memories started hurting. You thought the pain meant something was wrong. That feeling their name still rise in your chest, like smoke, was a sign of weakness. You whispered, "Why do I still feel this?" and mistook the ache for failure. But in Zen, the ache isn't proof of breaking. It's proof of blooming. The soul only starts to hurt when it's waking up from a long, emotional sleep. What you feel now isn't destruction. It's restoration. Not collapse, but emergence. The Buddha once said, "As a lotus grows in the mud, so too can the awakened heart rise through suffering." And the very fact that your chest tightens when their memory comes back is a sign that your soul has finally stopped avoiding the wound. Before this, you were numb. You distracted. You over-explained. You minimized what it meant. You smiled too soon. You called it closure when it was only silence. But now, the pain has grown louder. Not because you're going backward, but because healing is finally beginning to move forward. And healing always makes noise when it's real. Real healing doesn't feel like relief in the beginning. It feels like your heart cracking open in places you thought were already sealed. It feels like tears at 2 a.m. for things you thought you buried. It feels like missing someone you know you can never return to, but no longer wanting to return either. And that in-between space? That ache that rises but doesn't beg to go back. That's not confusion. That's the soul exhaling for the first time in years. Because before healing begins, we usually pretend we're fine. We keep busy. We keep scrolling. We keep proving. We laugh louder than we feel. We say, It's okay when it's not. But the body always remembers. The soul always holds the truth. And one day, when it feels safe enough, the pain starts to rise. And not to hurt you, but to release you. Zen teaches, you cannot wash away the mud by adding more water. You must let it settle. The discomfort you feel now is not your enemy. It's the settling. It's everything rising to the surface, so you no longer have to carry it in silence. Your chest is tight, because your truth is stretching out. Your breath is shaky, because your soul is expanding. You feel tired, because you're finally not lying to yourself anymore. You're not missing them. You're just moving through the places where their presence used to live. Like walking through an empty house that still echoes with voices. It's not about going back. It's about turning the lights on and choosing which room you want to live in now. Healing isn't always soft. Sometimes it hurts more than the heartbreak ever did. Because now you're seeing clearly. Now you're grieving what could have been and what will never be. But in that grief, you are growing roots. In that ache, you are reclaiming ground. And in those tears, you are watering a future version of you that will rise without needing anyone to keep them alive. The pain began as memory, but it ends as a teacher, because every time it returns, it shows you how much more conscious you've become. You don't beg anymore. You don't shrink. You don't apologize for feeling. You sit. You breathe. You weep if needed. And then you stand. Softer, clearer, more honest with yourself than you've ever been. The Buddhists say, nothing ever goes away until it has taught us what we need to know. So if it still hurts, it's not because you're stuck. It's because the final truth hasn't yet finished whispering through you. Listen to it. Don't rush it. This pain has a message. It's not saying, return to them. It's saying, return to yourself. And the moment you stop seeing the pain as a punishment and start honoring it as a passage, your healing will no longer feel like breaking. It will feel like remembering that you were always whole, even before they came, even after they left, even now, as you breathe through the memory. And finally, let yourself feel everything your silence was protecting. The mind echoes, until the heart sits in silence. You keep hearing them, in your thoughts, in your dreams, in the spaces between conversations. When you're doing nothing, when you're doing everything. It's strange how someone can leave your life, but still walk through your mind like they never closed the door. You tell yourself you're fine, that you've let go, that you've accepted, but then their memory returns, without asking. It moves through your chest like wind through an open window, and suddenly you're back where you promised you'd never be. Why? Why does the echo still follow you? Why does their absence still speak louder than most people's presence? In Zen, we don't blame the echo. We don't try to fight it. We sit with it. We listen. We bow. Because the mind doesn't echo just for the sake of pain. It echoes because the heart hasn't sat still long enough to truly hear what's underneath the noise. We live our lives running from silence. We fill every moment with sound. Music, scrolling, talking, working, moving, as if quiet is dangerous. As if stillness will say the one thing we're not ready to hear. But Zen whispers, only in deep silence do the truths of the soul arise. You've been trying to silence the echo with distraction, but distraction only delays the invitation. And the invitation is this: sit, breathe, feel. Not to analyze the memory, but to become so still that it finally settles. So still that the storm inside begins to mirror the peace outside. There's a Buddhist parable of a student who came to the master and said, "I keep thinking about her. The more I try to forget, the louder the thought becomes." The master handed him a bowl of water. "Stir it," he said. The student stirred. "Now, can you see your reflection?" "No," he answered. "Then wait, let the water become still." When the water stilled, his reflection appeared. And the master said, "This is your mind. Stop stirring, sit in silence, and you will see your true self again." The echo remains, because you keep stirring the memory, fighting it, escaping it, feeding it with fear. But what if you just stopped? Not stopped feeling, but stopped running, stopped judging, stopped labeling every wave of emotion as a setback. What if you let the thought come and simply watched it pass like a cloud across a vast sky? What if you remembered, you are not the cloud, you are the sky. You are the watcher, not the noise. The echo is not there to torment you. It's there to remind you you've forgotten how to sit with your own soul. And your soul doesn't need closure. It needs presence. It doesn't need answers. It needs silence. Not the silence of loneliness, but the silence that feels like prayer, like truth, like finally exhaling after years of pretending to be okay. You've been talking over your own heart, and now it's time to listen. The Buddhists call this shikantaza, just sitting, not to fix, not to plan, not to achieve, just to be. Because when you sit long enough and breathe deep enough, you begin to hear something beneath the echo, a stillness, a warmth, a voice that doesn't sound like fear. And that voice says, "You're safe to feel now. You don't need to hold it all. You don't need to chase what left. You don't need to make sense of what never made sense. You just need to sit and let the storm exhaust itself. Because when the mind stops moving, the heart begins to rise. Not with noise, but with knowing. Not with answers, but with clarity. Not with effort, but with grace. That is the moment the echo fades. Not because it's gone, but because you no longer fear its return. You no longer run from the memory. You no longer resist the thought. You simply sit with yourself. And remember that peace isn't something you chase. It's something you return to. Like breath, like truth, like home. And in that sacred silence, where nothing needs to be fixed, where the heart simply is, the mind grows quiet, not empty, but whole. And the echo, it bows and leaves. Now you understand. The echo wasn't punishment. It wasn't madness. It wasn't weakness. It was your soul, trying to bring you back to the silence, where healing was always waiting. You thought the memory was haunting you, but it was guiding you back to the words you never said, the truth you buried, the feelings you feared, back to the breath, to the stillness, to the moment where you finally sit, not to forget, but to listen. Zen doesn't ask you to erase what hurt you. It only asks you to stop running from it, to breathe through it, to bow to it, and then to rise lighter. Because the echo isn't loud anymore, is it? Now it's a whisper. Now it's a teacher. Now it's part of the stillness you carry with you. And if tonight, for the first time in a long time, you feel even a little closer to peace, then the echo did its job. You didn't come here to forget them. You came here to remember yourself. And now that you've returned, you're no longer echoing. You're becoming.